It's a pleasure to have Professor Satinder Dhiman, the President of International Chamber for Service Industry, visiting India this year. Hearty welcome to you, Professor Saab.
Thank you, sir.
He comes from Woodbury University, California, Burbank, USA. A very eminent scholar, author, and of course, educator. He had been in India earlier as a student and as well as a teacher come educator and authored a number of books. Having gone to United States, once again he became a student also, and he's an educator also, and once again he's devoting and spending lots of time on the creativity, writing books, bringing something new to the civilization, whatsoever can be added up to the education system. Hearty welcome, Professor.
Thank you, sir.
Now, in the last episode, we were talking about Indian epics, we were talking about some eminent Indians, particularly coming from the historical perspective, from our heritage. If I have to reframe, because most of the time it is conveyed that the Indian curriculum or the syllabi is not at par with the education system, what is required globally, which is to be acceptable. So that anybody moving from here, any point of time, they should be keeping the pace in education at par with others. If I have to reform my curriculum, my syllabi, my entire education process, how do I link it up with rich heritage of India?
That's the most vital question that I think the whole education system should be debating about. I believe that in order for any education system to be successful, it has to have a very sound, what is called foundation. And what happened with India was that we have been under British rule for many years, and then when we became free, we were not able to sever our relationship with the British education system. Now, I'm not criticizing that. What I'm saying is, what happened was, as we were, during those 200, 250 years, we kind of moved away from, systematically, we moved away from Indian roots. So we borrowed certain systems which were not germane to our essence, which were not germane to our own sort of upbringing. And yet they were successful. We were churning out peons and clerical people for the most part. So the creativity was missing because it was a system. It's like grafting. You take something from outside and you graft to the soil, but the soil has to accept it. There has to be some kind of acceptance on both levels. I believe that if India wants to compete in the world market or in the world arena, first of all, it has to strengthen its own roots, which, in my opinion, they are not strong at this time because we are not really sure who we are. We are not sure whether most of the people, I travel around in India and they are very surprised when I talk about Bhagavad Gita. They say, this professor is coming from America, he should be talking about American system. I do that. I talk about American experts also, but I try to bring it back to the Indian context. What is a part of our soil? Hamari mitti ki khushboo kisme aayegi? So I try to bring that to the epics, to our own saints and sages and great people, and that resonates with them, and many people feel surprised that nobody told us that. Nobody has pointed out that there are so many great parts to our own culture, but we have kind of westernized our education. What we should do is, we should take the roots from Indian civilization, Indian culture, Indian heritage, and then we should marinate that, then we should blend that, as I said in the previous episode, with the Western models, the best practices of the Western model. But the roots have to be Indian. I'm very clear about that, because if the roots are not there, if the foundation is shaky, the building cannot be on a solid ground. So now, to give you an example, for example, in the early education, our stories should come from our own culture, our own heritage. We have so many, experts, so many scholars, so many writers, talk about poetry, talk about epics, talk about religious upbringing. I come from Punjab, and I was exposed to Gurbani, for example. It is such a marvelous piece of poetry. It is not just something you do on Sunday or you do on kind of religious holidays. It is something should be a part of your life. Religious, spiritual outlook should become a part of your life. Why? Because we are spiritual beings. We are, as somebody said, we are not human beings on a spiritual journey. We are spiritual beings on a human journey.
Wow.
That root has to be nurtured every day, because as you know, if you just teach students about skills, then they will become like machines. They will be very good employees, but there won't be any satisfaction. There won't be any gratification. There won't be any fulfillment. And when that is missing, it creates social problems. It creates family problems. So we have to educate the whole person. We have to bring our education to integration level. But for that, we have to be very deliberate and very intentional in drawing, extracting strands, threads from all Indian practices, so that we can blend that. So that a student who goes through K through 12 or 1 through 12th grade, they really know their own great leaders, their own great teachers, which is not the case these days. I was very surprised in one of the colleges I was speaking last year, and I asked some questions about, have you read this? Have you read this? For example, I'm working on 2 books on Bhagavad Gita and leadership, so I asked them, have you studied Bhagavad Gita? Actually, I was lecturing in Hyderabad 2 years ago on the role of the director of the institute asked me specifically, sir, can you speak about Bhagavad Gita and management? So my lecture was like that. So there was somebody in the audience, a professor of course, because it was faculty development program. So at the end of my talk, like in the middle almost, he asked me, sir, don't you think, you were talking about Bhagavad Gita, don't you think that Bhagavad Gita and Quran and Bible and some other religious scripture, they talk about the same thing? That was an interesting question. So I asked him, I said, sir, have you read those things? He said, no, suna hi hai, log batate hain. Then I said, we can't have a discussion. If you have not read something and you are giving an opinion about it, and then I requested him, sir, you are a teacher. You should be very careful about what you say, right? So this is the problem with our mind now. Everybody knows, you ask anybody, do you know about Bhagavad Gita? They say, yes. What is the message? Karma Yoga. That is just the basic part of it. It is not the whole story. But then you ask them, what is Karma Yoga? They are not really clear about it. They know outline. Ke karam karo, phal ki ichha na karo. But the question is, how can you do karma without expecting results? So the idea is that one should be told that you are doing karma, action, which you cannot really not do, but your attitude has to be different. You should do it, as I said yesterday, with an attitude of offering. That is Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga is not Karma Karo Phal Ki Ichha Na Karo, because that is impossible. Everybody does. Now we are sitting here, we are doing some karma, but we are expecting some result out of that. There is an outcome out of that. But if I say the outcome should be to benefit me, to make me feel important, then Bhagavad Gita says it is not a pure motivation. Then it is not Karma Yoga. We are doing karma every second. How to make a yoga out of karma? How to make it kind of, you do the karma without trying to be attached to that. That is the kimia, that is the alchemy of Karma Yoga. So what I discovered was, people know very kind of like superficially about our epics, about our own religious scriptures. There's not a deep understanding of that. Or they may read every day, but it doesn't click, sort of thing. Like yesterday I was mentioning something from Burbank, Nanak Nirguniya gun kare, gunavantya gun de, which means that the knowledge stream comes from some sort of divine force, some divine source. But it also enhances those people who already have knowledge. Understanding this part is very, very important. In another place, Gurbani says, "Home dirg rog hai, daru bhi isma." Meaning, ego is a big disease, is a big problem. But the solution to the ego is also within the ego itself. This is also a Karma Yoga sort of understanding. Karma can be binding, but if you know how, the attitude, then it can be liberating also. So the solution of karma, getting out of karma binding, or karma sansar, or karma yoga, or the karma jal, I should say, comes from the karma itself. Now this is just one example. We can take some other examples. For example, I remember, but then before I go there, I would like to tell a quick story about. It is also very important that we preserve the purity of teachings. Mixing nahi honi chahiye usme koi. There is no room for fusion. You know, when you are talking about roots, it has to be pure.
Teaching.
I remember a person whose cow became sick, and he goes to a naturopathy doctor who used to treat animals with natural remedies. So this doctor said, sir, what you need is, when you go home, you need to take some butter, like maybe 500 grams of butter, and then you mix that butter with the pepper, kali mirch, के साथ mix करके इसको पिला दो, ठीक हो जाएगी, पेट ठीक हो जाएगा, right? That was the solution. So now this person goes home and starts preparing the medicine. So he takes out the pepper, 2 tablespoons of pepper, and then he tries to, when he started adding butter, he thought, butter comes from milk. Milk is already inside the cow. So why should I give butter? तो उसने काली मिर्ची खिला दी उसको, and the cow became more sick, right? And then he goes to the doctor again. So the formula change कर दिया. It's not allowed. It should be pure. So he goes back to the doctor and he says, doctor, your formula didn't work. My cow became more sick. तो उन्होंने कहा, how did you do it? कैसे किया था आपने? Then he told the story. So then the doctor explained that even if cow, the milk is there inside the cow, and the butter is within the milk, but the cow's system does not have the mechanism, उसके लिए आपको बाहर निकालकर उसको churn करना पड़ेगा. You have to take it out and churn it, and then butter will show up. The butter is there, but the cow is not capable of extracting that, right? Same way, teacher does that. Teacher is able to churn out things and is able to give it back to the student. So the teaching has to be preserved in a pure manner. It should not be आप अपना उसमें तीर तुका ना लगाइए. That is the beauty of our own culture. It should be preserved, implemented in a very pure, purified manner.
Okay. Any questions?
Sir, I have a question. What is the difference between a ego and a self-respect? इन दोनों में बहुत ही thin line होती है. वो क्या है? हम कैसे जान पाए कि वो ego है या हमारी self-respect है?
If I may be honest about your question, the person who is asking the question, or the person who has this question, not just you, whoever has this question, is it my ego talking now, or is it my self-respect talking now, knows the answer to that question. Why? You see, what is the definition of ego? E stands for edging God out. Meaning, whenever we are trying to take the credit of everything for us, that is called ego. Self-respect means, now there's a trick to that. Self-respect should not be made visible. You should have self-respect within yourself, inside. Outside you should be humble. It is like the word business. You look at the word business. In the word business, you comes before I. That means put the other person first. And I is silent. You don't say busyness. The word I is not pronounced. So आपका जो ego है, वो silent चाहिए. Only then you will be able to succeed in the business of life, like in any other business. So ego is it's a false self-pride. And the more you know about yourself, the more you will know when the ego is working and when you are operating from your self-respect. And again, the person who is asking the question should be able to know that through self-awareness, and then you should be able to check it. Because sometimes you're sitting in a meeting, somebody is talking, you feel like interrupting. If you are self-aware, you will say, don't try to go on ego trip, I need to be silent, let the person finish their talk, right? So that way you are able to. The other thing is, ego tries to prove itself all the time. You know, people who like to prove, that is ego. That's one of the. Self-respect is something which you earn from other people. You cannot enforce self-respect. You cannot ask for it. It has to be earned. It just comes after as a byproduct of when you are doing something good, you have some qualities. The self-respect comes on its own. It goes back to my earlier point the other day about the difference between duty and rights. If everybody takes care of their duties, the rights will be taken care of. Similarly, if everybody keeps their ego in check, everybody's self-respect will be fine, and in that way, your own self-respect will be established. The beauty of self-respect is you do not have to ask for it. It is a given when you are doing the right thing.
It comes automatically.
Like a perfume. A flower does not decide to give perfume. And a flower also does not decide कि पड़ोसी से मेरी बनती नहीं तो मैं अपनी खुशबू वहाँ नहीं भेजना चाहता. Right? A flower when blossoms, it is for everybody. Same way. So, understand it this way. Ego does not exist. You will be very surprised to know. If I ask you, can you show me your ego? You won't be able to. Ego is just a figment of imagination. It is a concept. It is an imposter. We just believe in it. It has no real entity. Right? So when you know that ego has no self-entity, self-existence, and I am devoting so much time to it, you can save that time and create good qualities in you which will give you self-respect. So from that point of view, save the time from ego and devote it to developing some qualities, then everybody will give you self-respect, in my humble opinion.
Wonderful perspective. Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, I would like to ask that in 2013, an Indian school introduced a chapter on the life story of Priyanka Chopra, who is very well-known celebrity of India. So we are talking about making mythological stories as a part of the curriculum of students in higher education. Do you think that the life stories of celebrities should also be a part, and they will be able to attract more attention of the students rather than the mythological stories?
It depends upon what you are trying to teach. It depends upon what values you are trying to inculcate in the audience. I have no desire to criticize anybody, including Priyanka Chopra, right? But the point is, we are talking about two different things here. We are talking about some information which is time-tested. We are talking about those great people who have stood the test of time. Many celebrities may not stand the test of time. I will give you an example. There are many great scholars. Let's not talk about scholars first. There are many great celebrities. After 10-15 years, people forget them. Same way songs. Some songs become very hit, they hit the charts, but after 2-3 years they are gone. But classical music stays forever. Why? Because classical music is based on certain truths which are absolute. The people that I'm talking about, those people have stood the test of time. So there is nothing wrong with studying sports people and celebrities from movies, no problem. But वो विभाग अलग है, department थोड़ा सा अलग है, right? And I have no authority and no expertise to speak about that. My point is, we should put our faith more on those things which has been time tested. Thousands and thousands of years have proved that those people, that teaching, you see, there will be many books in the world, but the place of certain books will always be important. Thousands and thousands books are published every day, but when somebody talks about Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, their place is different. Because they embody certain truths which are universal. They apply to you, they apply to me. They apply to me when I'm today, tomorrow, and year after. Many examples that you gave, have you given, they are very good examples. But 20-30 years from now, मुझे भी अहले जहां भूल जाएंगे शहजाद, खबर किसे है डूबे हुए सितारों की. So if you pin your hopes with सितारे, तो वो चढ़ते और डूबते रहते हैं. हम आपकी दृष्टि रवि, सूरज की तरफ ले जाना चाहते हैं. Sun, which is always going to be there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor. It was such a wonderful to have the insight from you onto the Indian education system. Thanks for this episode, and we will take on the vocational education in the next part of our deliberation and discussions. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.